Times are good in Oklahoma City. The Thunder sit at the head of the table out west, vigilantly besting their cutthroat adversaries. The people of the city flood the Paycom Center in anticipation of their team's victory against an endless line of threats. Being 10 plus games ahead of the competition in a conference this stacked is a testament to their sheer dominance. And their success is somehow an elevation from last season where they finished with the exact same seeding. The Thunder are poised to finish as the number 1 seed in the Western Conference in back-to-back years, a feat that hasn't been accomplished since the Golden State Warriors in 2016 and 2017. And if your organization's trajectory mirrors the Warriors dynasty in any fashion, that is called perfect assurance. Leading his troops is a 6'6" shooting guard out of Hamilton, Ontario by the name of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Gilgeous-Alexander has arguably been the best guard on this planet for the last 2 years. In this current season, he's averaging 33 points per game, 6 assists per game, 5 rebounds per game, almost 2 steals a night and a block a game on 65% true shooting. Gilgeous-Alexander has scorched the hardwood on a nightly basis and at a historic rate. 18 players in NBA history have averaged 30 points per game 3 or more times in their respective careers. Only 7 of them have performed this feat while converting more than 50% of their field goals. By the end of this season, Gilgeous-Alexander will become the 8th member of this invite-only circle. Maybe Giannis Antetokounmpo can induct him into this club since he's been a member for 2 years now, before he goes and sits in his own private one-man booth as the only player to ever record 30 points per game in a season while shooting over 60% from the field. A benchmark even the greatest scorers in history, from Wilt Chamberlain to Michael Jordan to Kevin Durant, have failed to reach. And what's absurd is that he's on track to do it again, but unfortunately the Greek Freak has been leapfrogged by lessers and practically erased from the MVP conversation. But before we talk about the abhorrent diminishment of Giannis Antetokounmpo's historic run, we must first talk about Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Nikola Jokic, who are in a heated standoff for the reins of the 2025 MVP award. Nikola Jokic is doing things we will never see again. His transcendence on offense is incomprehensible at this point. A big man with the ability to score 26.5 a night and snag 12.5 rebounds for the last 5 years is already an extraordinary outlier. But when you factor in the 9 assists per game to his 5-year peak, the magnitude of his epic becomes undeniable. Here are some, dare I say, empirical facts. Nikola Jokic is the greatest playmaker at the center position. Not only that, the man known as the Joker is the greatest offensive center in NBA history. But even if we disregard his prestigious career, solely looking at his stats this season, he's averaging a 30-point triple-double. When Jokic's current teammate Russell Westbrook accomplished the unthinkable by averaging a triple-double over an entire season in 2017, it meant an automatic MVP. The Brody demolished an impervious pillar during his magical run, and it has made him synonymous with the word triple-double. So when Nikola Jokic becomes the 3rd man in NBA history to average a triple-double for an entire season, he should be considered the most valuable player, right? Well, despite his brilliance, Jokic is not without his shortcomings, and they may cost him MVP number 4. The man is a mastermind on the offensive side of the ball. He shaped out a successful career with the ball in his hands. Problem is, there's the other half of his game, which makes a normally untouchable Titan appear ordinary. Jokic goes from king to, well, Joker in his decade-long professional career as a 6'11" center has never averaged over 1 block a game in a single season. He has 534 total blocks throughout the course of his career. Utah Jazz legend Mark Eaton recorded 456 blocks in a single season back in 1985. There exists a small corner of the internet where some rather preposterously argued that Jokic is actually a net positive on the defensive end, citing his BPM or defensive win shares. Yet, as we all know, advanced metrics often fail to capture defensive impact. Jokic is a bad defender, but that does not devalue his offensive prowess. No, it is his biggest deficiency alongside his generational scoring and passing. I mean, Mark Eaton finished his 11-year career tallying 840 total assists, while the Joker totaled 1,019 during the 2021-22 season alone. This has been my biggest gripe with this back and forth MVP conversation. Supporters on opposite ends feel the need to completely nullify the adversary's candidacy. Joker truthers will ram home the fact that SGA isn't the offensive hub that Jokic is, that his team's success negates his historic campaign, and that he's a free throw merchant. Meanwhile, the other side is hell-bent on proving that Big Joke is some fat slob who couldn't guard a 9th grader one-on-one, while also grinning ear to ear every time Big Fella drops 40 and loses to a lottery team. In regards to actual constructive discourse surrounding this topic, which is far and few, the arguments are more nuanced. You have a high caliber guard in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander who's been on a burner these last 2 seasons and has looked unstoppable on the box score and the win column. With the Joker, you have an all-time great still redefining the limits of his position, putting up numbers that were previously unheralded for a big. But his team's success has not matched his individual dominance. If I told you a player had a 5-year stretch where he could have legitimately been crowned MVP every single year, you'd think he's the greatest player of all time, rivaling the likes of Michael Jordan, LeBron James, Kobe Bryant, Tim Duncan, Larry Bird, and so on. With Jokic's lack of championships, he cannot be placed above any of the aforementioned or in the all-time top 10 in general. That's where the dreaded sentiment creeps in. The narrative about a 3-time MVP who only has 1 championship run against subpar competition to show for his overflowing trophy cabinet. Voter fatigue has robbed some of the best to ever lace him up of their rightful coronation. It's the reason MJ and LBJ don't have 8 to 10 league MVPs, and it's the reason the Joker was robbed of the award in 2023. It may very well be the reason Shai Gilgeous-Alexander wins the award this season if you are of the mindset that the OKC guard is undeserving. Do these narratives hold truth? Of course not. Narratives and storylines can captivate an audience, but at the end of the day, this is a sport, not a show. But they still play a factor. That is indisputable. SGA has the chance to win the NBA championship. Nikola Jokic and the Denver Nuggets have been written off from even making the conference finals. They're led by a seasoned giant whose defensive liabilities are becoming further exploited as he ages. With his team downtrodden, the OKC Thunder are a fearsome bunch with the complete opposite trajectory. If Denver has a superstar playing to the 99th percentile, then Oklahoma has a man playing at the 97th. You factor in Gilgeous-Alexander's willingness to play on both sides of the court and the fact that he averages more blocks than a 7-footer, and all of a sudden Jokic's argument looks gaunt. That's been the biggest quandary with his MVP race. The reason why it's so difficult to reach a definitive conclusion is because it comes down to what you value. Do you value someone who is redefining what's possible in the sport while suffering his own downsides, or a wrecking ball who's performing near that level but not quite, but also has no weaknesses and is playing for what matters the most? It's a heated debate because it leaves us clinging to each man's individual performance and their team's performance on a game-to-game basis. Have the voters grown tired of picking the same man again as they've done so in the past, or is Gilgeous-Alexander truly the most deserving? Narratives shape legacies. Just look at Giannis Antetokounmpo. You want to talk about redefining the sport? Think of all the greats who've averaged 30 points per game in the league's history. It is the simplest benchmark for elite scoring, and out of all those seasons, there are only 2 instances where a player has averaged 30 points per game while converting more than 60% of his field goals, and both of those seasons belong to Giannis Antetokounmpo. If the Joker has carried the Denver Nuggets, what do you call Antetokounmpo's efforts with the Milwaukee Bucks? What about Gilgeous-Alexander? He's been praised for his two-way capabilities as to hinder Jokic's campaign. But the greatest two-way player of our generation, one of the greatest fusions of offense and defense the game has ever seen, is the Greek Freak. He's tenfold the defender Gilgeous-Alexander is or ever will be. The man has been a top 5 MVP candidate for this past 7 years, while also being a top 10 Defensive Player of the Year candidate in that same time span. If we disregard narratives, is there an argument that Giannis Antetokounmpo would outshine both of the current MVP favorites if they all swap places? It's something to think about. But there are no conclusive answers, and that's a good thing. The NBA has progressed to such an extent that the feverish debate over who reigns supreme involves players who possess vastly different skill sets, techniques, and philosophies, sparking polarizing arguments in the process. Even the outlier has a legitimate claim to the throne, and we all know at this level, with these talents, it really can be any given night. As the season's end nears, these conflicts brew an excitement for what comes after. In the playoffs, all bets are off, and every man has a chance to solidify or crumble his efforts. If ye so desperately seek the truth, to finally put this argument to rest, just tune in around late April when the playoffs start, and you'll find your answer. Thanks for watching.